The late afternoon wind came cold from the Hudson River and cut across the avenues like a thin blade, raising dust and the smell of hot dogs from the stands near the subway. Manhattan had its usual cynical sheen, brightly lit shop windows, hurried taxis, too many people thinking only of themselves, quick steps as if the ground were a treadmill. For Laura, however, it was a rare night, one of those nights when she could forget that she spent the whole day on spreadsheets, meetings, and demands. She left the brick building where she worked in the Midtown area, with her coat buttoned up to her neck and her cell phone clutched in her hand, while talking to her mother on speakerphone. "I know, Mom. I'll call when I get there. I promise. No, it's not dangerous. It's just New York," she said, trying to sound lighthearted. On the other end, a worried voice insisted on giving advice. Laura hung up with a somewhat guilty smile, put the phone away, and searched for her boyfriend. It was impossible not to recognize him. Daniel Miller had the posture of someone who knew exactly where he was going, even when he pretended to be distracted. He was leaning against the building's entrance, watching the flow of people as one observes a river, not a sea of strangers. "Sorry for the delay," she said, kissing him on the cheek. Daniel smiled, a smile that wasn't for advertising or social media. It was intimate, tired, and genuine. "You weren't late. I arrived early." "As usual," he replied. Laura knew that habit. Daniel had been like that ever since she'd met him months before, in a small cafe near Union Square, where he was leafing through a book on behavioral psychology. The conversation started by chance when he commented, with gentleness and strange precision, that the barista seemed more tense than he appeared, and that it was best not to complain about the coffee. Laura laughed, thinking it was an exaggeration. Minutes later, a customer started yelling because her order was wrong, and Daniel calmly stood up and deflected the commotion, placing his body between the barista and the woman without seeming aggressive. It wasn't theatrical heroism. It was just a silent competence. When Laura asked, he said he worked in federal investigations, only later. At a dinner with cheap wine and the window open to the street noise, did he reveal the detail, a former FBI agent on medical leave after a serious case. He rarely spoke of it. It wasn't a secret out of vanity. It was a part of his life he seemed to want to keep at a distance so he could breathe. That night, they had planned something simple, dinner at a Korean restaurant in Koreatown, and then a walk to Bryant Park to see the illuminated tree, drink hot chocolate, and laugh at small things. Laura wanted normalcy. Daniel did too, at least outwardly. "You look nice today," she commented as they started walking. "I'm trying," he said. "The city both helps and hinders." "She's too noisy. She's too honest," he replied, glancing at a man passing by pushing a cart full of bags. "Nobody pretends for long here." They crossed Fifth Avenue, dodging tourists. The light from the signs reflected in the old puddles of rain. Daniel didn't hold her arm tightly, but always shifted his body slightly towards the street. It was discreet, almost imperceptible. Laura had already asked why. "Habit," he had said. In the restaurant, the smell of Korean barbecue and chili peppers filled the air. They ate, talked about trivial things, Laura's boss, the traffic, a bad TV series she had insisted on watching. Daniel laughed, but there were moments when he fell silent, and his eyes wandered to some point in the room as if he were measuring distances, assessing angles, counting exits. Laura knew it was no use asking him to relax. That wasn't a choice. After dinner, they walked. Bryant Park was crowded, with people skating, children running around, couples taking selfies. Laura felt her chest warm. It was easy to believe the world was safe when twinkling lights were everywhere. "Thank you for coming," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for insisting," he replied. "I forget that it's possible to live without looking at the worst." They stayed there for a few minutes. Then Daniel looked at his watch and suggested going back. Laura agreed. It was late, and she had to work early the next day. They decided to walk to a quieter subway station to avoid the crowds. They walked down the side streets, where the lights were less generous. The change was always abrupt in New York, from a vibrant block to another almost empty one, with closed facades and stronger winds. Laura noticed that Daniel had become quieter. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Okay," he said, but his gaze swept across the sidewalk. I just don't like narrow streets at night. Do you want to take a taxi? No. We're almost there. They turned onto a street Laura didn't know very well. There was a closed parking lot, a rusty fire escape, and an overflowing garbage can. A hooded man walked past on the other side, talking to himself. Daniel slowed down. Laura felt a chill without knowing why. That's when he saw two young men leaning against a wall on the corner. One of them was smoking. The other was fiddling with his cell phone, but his eyes were raised. They didn't look like people waiting for someone. They looked like people waiting for a target. Daniel, Laura murmured. I saw it, he replied, without changing his tone. Keep walking. Normal. The two boys straightened up as they approached. A third emerged from behind a parked car. A quick, rehearsed movement. Laura felt her body freeze, her heart pounding so loudly it sounded like an alarm. Hey, hold on a minute, the one who was smoking said, in a voice that tried to be playful. He was young, maybe in his early 20s, but he had a hard look. What a nice couple, huh? You're in no hurry. The other one, the one with the cell phone, was already closer. He took his hand out of his pocket and revealed a small, black gun, pointed downwards, but obvious enough. The third one, taller and thinner, stood behind them like someone closing the invisible door of a trap. Give me what you have, said the man with the cell phone, now without a smile. Wallet, cell phone. Quick, Laura felt her throat go dry. Her first reaction was to look at Daniel as if he were an emergency button. But Daniel didn't make any heroic gesture. He simply breathed and slowly raised his hands, one palm open, the other gently holding Laura's forearm, as if to say, stay with me. Okay, Daniel said. His voice was too calm, almost irritating, if Laura weren't terrified. No problem. We'll cooperate, that's it. Cooperate, the smoker repeated, approaching Laura. You too, princess. Cell phone. Purse. Laura reached for her purse with difficulty. Her fingers trembled. She pulled out her cell phone, but her hand seemed unresponsive. Quick. The one on the cell phone growled, raising the gun a little higher. Daniel took a slight step to the side, as if to make it easier to get there. And in that minimal gesture, Laura noticed something she hadn't seen before. Daniel was calculating. His gaze wasn't on the gun barrel. It was on the robber's wrist, on the distance between them, on the position of the third young man's feet. It was a look that didn't ask for mercy. It was a cold, analytical look. Laura swallowed hard. Please, she whispered, not knowing to whom. Don't worry, Daniel said, almost imperceptibly, just to her. The smoker snatched the purse from her hand with a tug and laughed, as if it were a joke. The one with the cell phone held out his other hand to Daniel. Portfolio. Daniel took his wallet out of his pocket and handed it over. But as he handed it over, he did something Laura only understood later. He let the wallet fall sideways, as if it had slipped. The robber looked down for a second, instinctively. 1 second, that's all. And it was in that second that Daniel moved. It wasn't a cinematic punch. It wasn't a movie-worthy strike. It was quick, efficient, and frighteningly simple. Daniel spun his body, grabbed the gun's wrist with both hands, and twisted it at an angle that seemed impossible. The crack was muffled by the wind, but Laura heard it. The boy yelled, the gun fell, and Daniel kicked it away with his foot, pushing it under a car. The smoker tried to react, but Daniel was already on him, using his shoulder and body weight to throw him against the wall. The third, the tallest, tried to pull Daniel from behind, but Daniel took a step back and made him lose his balance, using the boy's own momentum. In less than 5 seconds, the scene had turned into chaos, screams, shoes slipping on the asphalt, panting breath, and Laura paralyzed in the middle. What, Daniel? She managed to say. Run to the corner. Now, he ordered, for the first time in a harsh voice. Laura obeyed without thinking. She ran, but turned her head. She saw Daniel holding the smoker to the ground, placing a knee on his back and a hand on his arm, immobilizing him. The boy with the twisted wrist was crying in pain, leaning against the car, cursing. The third tried to escape, but Daniel grabbed him by the jacket and pulled him back with a short movement. Stay on the ground, Daniel said. On the ground. Now. The third hesitated, saw Daniel's look, and surrendered as if realizing he had lost before even beginning. Laura reached the corner, trembling, and saw an older couple across the street looking frightened. She shouted, "Call the police, please." The couple seemed frozen for a moment. Then the man picked up his cell phone. Laura looked again. Daniel kept the three of them under control. He didn't yell, he didn't hit them. He just held them, as if it were routine. As the sirens began to approach, Laura felt her legs give way. He leaned against the wall, breathing as if he had run a marathon. Daniel glanced at her for a brief second and made a small gesture with his head, as if to say, "Everything's under control." But Laura saw an old tension in his jaw, as if this situation had awakened something dormant. The police arrived quickly, 2 cars. Blue and red lights painted the street. One of them pointed his gun, shouting orders. Daniel immediately raised his hands. "I'm not armed," he said. "Their gun is under the black sedan. I'm holding the suspects." The policeman hesitated, confused by the clarity. Another policeman came and handcuffed the boys carefully and angrily. "Who are you?" the policeman asked, looking Daniel up and down. Daniel took a deep breath. The wind ruffled his hair. "Daniel Miller, former FBI agent. I'm on leave. I can show identification." The word FBI changed the atmosphere. The police officers exchanged glances, as if the street had gained an extra layer of seriousness. Laura walked slowly toward Daniel, still trembling. The police officers caught the thieves, collected her purse, and his wallet. One of them asked if Laura was hurt. She shook her head, unable to form sentences. Daniel took her hand. It was warm and firm, but his hand trembled slightly. For the first time since she had known him, Daniel seemed affected. "Are you okay?" she finally asked. He stared at her. In his eyes there was something that wasn't fear. It was guilt. "I am," he said, "but we need to go home. Now." "Why?" Daniel looked at the police car, at the boys being taken away, and then at the street. "Because this wasn't just a random robbery," he said quietly, as if he didn't want the world to hear. "And I think someone's going to want to know who I am." Laura felt a chill in her stomach, colder than the wind from the Hudson. She didn't know it yet, but that simple night, with Korean dinner and park lights, had become the first piece of a dangerous puzzle. And Daniel, even though distant, had just set foot back on the same road he swore to leave behind. Daniel's apartment was in Astoria, across the East River, in an old building with narrow staircases and the smell of lingering food in the hallways. Laura had slept there a few times. It was a modest place for someone who had worked on federal cases, but it suited him. No ostentation, no unnecessary objects, with an almost military-like organization hidden beneath an appearance of normalcy. The living room had a worn sofa, a bookshelf, and a small table where Daniel always left his keys in the same spot. As soon as they entered, he locked the door and put on the extra chain. Then he pulled back the blinds, plunging the room into a dim light that Laura didn't like. "Daniel, what's going on?" she asked, taking off her coat. Her voice came out higher-pitched than she intended. He breathed slowly, as if trying to contain something inside. "I need to check something," he said, walking to the kitchen counter. He opened a drawer and took out a small metal case. Laura's eyes widened. "That's it. It's not a weapon," he replied, seeing her expression. He opened the case. It was an old cell phone, one of those that didn't look smart, and a small pen drive. "I thought you were on leave." "Seriously?" "I am," he said. "But leave doesn't mean..." Switching off, Laura sat down on the sofa. Her hands were still trembling. Images of the robbery flashed back through her mind. The gun, the snap of the wrist, the scream, the way Daniel had become a different person in seconds. "You almost killed one of them," she blurted out, her voice faltering. Daniel stopped for a moment, as if he had been hit. "I didn't almost kill," he said, composed. "I neutralized." "I know the difference." The sentence came out cold, automatic. Laura regretted saying it that way, but anger and fear were mixed together. "Sorry, I don't know who you were there." Daniel approached and knelt in front of her, taking her hands carefully, as if they were made of glass. "I was who I needed to be to keep you alive," he said. His voice was now more human. "And I hate that you saw that." Laura felt tears welling up, but she held them back. She didn't want to cry, not yet. "Why did you say it wasn't random?" she asked. Daniel let go of one hand and wiped his face with his palm, as if trying to wake up. The three of them, the way they surrounded us. It was organized. It didn't seem opportunistic. And the guy with the gun, he didn't know how to hold it properly. He wasn't someone who was used to it. It seemed more like someone playing a role. Are you saying it was staged? I don't know that yet, but I know when something is wrong. He got up and went to the window. He peeked through a crack in the blinds, looking at the street below. Laura looked too. Normal people, a dog, a car passing by. Daniel, you're being paranoid. He turned his face away, and for a moment Laura saw a deep weariness, as if that word had been used against him many times. I was trained to survive, and to identify patterns. Paranoia is when you imagine a threat where there isn't one. I'm saying that I felt a real threat. Laura took a breath, trying to organize her thoughts. But why? Why would anyone do that to you? Daniel remained silent, a heavy silence, as if he were weighing how much he could reveal without dragging Laura into an abyss. Because there are things, from my previous work, that haven't stayed buried, he said finally. Laura swallowed hard. What things? Daniel walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a book. Behind it, there was a thin folder hidden. He brought it out and placed it on the table. I didn't want you to get involved in this, he began, not even knowing about it. But now, you're already involved. He opened the folder and took out some sheets of paper, printed photos, a copy of a report. Laura saw names, dates, locations. She saw a photo of a bald man with a short beard, looking at a security camera. She saw another photo of an industrial warehouse. What is that? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. A case of arms trafficking and money laundering. A network that used shell companies in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. We investigated for almost 2 years. We arrested people, but the network didn't die. Laura felt a tightness in her chest. And you left because of that? Daniel hesitated. His eyes drifted away. I left because I started making mistakes. I started sleeping badly, seeing threats everywhere, and because an informant died, someone I promised to protect. Laura remained silent. She had never heard that before. Daniel always spoke of a serious matter as if it were a locked drawer. Do you think these guys have anything to do with this? I think so, he replied. Or someone who took advantage of the fact that I was vulnerable. A leave of absence is a period when you're out of the system, without the same protection, without the same network. Laura pressed her fingers against her palm. But why attack us in the street? Why not? I don't know, follow you? Daniel took the old cell phone out of its case and turned it on. The screen illuminated his face from below, creating shadows. Because they wanted to see how I would react, he said. If I'm still the same Daniel I used to be. If I still have instincts. If I still remember. Laura felt her stomach churn. That's absurd. Perhaps. But it's the most logical hypothesis. He dialed a number and waited. Laura heard a ring. Then, a female voice answered. You're alive, the voice said, without any greetings. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. Oh, Kim, Laura frowned. Kim. He had already mentioned a Kim once, in a brief conversation, saying she was a friend from work. You're calling from the phone I told you never to use, Miller, the voice continued. I had an incident today, Daniel said. I need to know if anything happened, any movement, any threat. There was silence on the other end. Laura realized that Daniel was listening with absolute attention. You're being watched, Kim finally said. I didn't want to tell you because you're on leave and I wanted you to rest. Who? I don't have a name yet, but I saw a strange license plate near your building yesterday. Rental car. And today, I saw a report request about you in the system. Someone pulled up your history. This isn't normal. Daniel stood motionless. Are you sure? I have it. And Miller, if this is connected to the Ridgeway case, you need to disappear for a few days. Laura heard the word Ridgeway and felt her chest tighten. It was the name in the report. I'm not going to disappear, Daniel said. I'm going to figure out what's happening. You're not on duty, Kim replied, now more firmly. You're broke, Daniel. You think I don't know? Laura froze when she heard that. Daniel clenched his jaw. I'm standing, he said. And today I had someone with me. She was threatened. Kim was silent for a moment. Then this got personal, she said. I'm going to send you what I have. And be careful. You know how this works. Whoever pulls your history can pull hers too." Daniel looked at Laura. She felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she said. "They could involve me if they want to come to me," Daniel said quietly. Kim said something more, but Daniel ended the call. The room became too quiet. Laura listened to her own heart. "I didn't ask for this to happen," she said, as if defending herself against an unseen accusation. Daniel approached and sat down next to her. "I know," he replied, "and that's why I need to be honest now. My leave, it's not just because of stress. I'm on leave because I was removed after questioning the wrong people. I suspected an internal leak, and that made me seem unstable." Laura blinked, trying to process it. "Are you saying there are people inside?" Daniel didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. His gaze said it all. Laura stood up and began pacing nervously around the room. "So what do we do? Go to the police? To the press? To whom?" Daniel watched her. "The police did what they could today. But if this gets bigger, the regular police can't handle it. And the press, they're only useful after someone dies." Laura felt angry. "So we just accept it? We live in fear?" Daniel took the report and put it back in the folder. "No," he said. "We'll get ready, and I'll try to find out what they want." Laura stopped in front of him, looking at him as if she were seeing someone new. "You said them, as if it were a certainty." Daniel took a deep breath. "Because, in my world, when you take down a scheme involving weapons and money, you don't just take down criminals. You take down vested interests. And vested interests don't retire." Laura bit her lip. She wanted to argue, wanted to say it was madness, but her body remembered the gun barrel, the way those guys appeared out of nowhere, synchronized. And she remembered Daniel's look, which seemed like he'd been waiting for this his whole life. She picked up her phone and noticed she had several notifications. Among them was a strange email with no subject and an attachment she hadn't opened. The sender was a random address. "Daniel," she called, showing the screen. He leaned forward, his face hardening. "It won't open," he said. "Show me the sender." Laura showed it to him. Daniel stood motionless for a moment, as if something had clicked into place. "That's no coincidence," he murmured. "What is it? It's bait. It's a warning. It's someone saying they know who you are." Laura felt like she couldn't breathe. Daniel stood up, grabbed a notebook, and began writing things down: times, location of the robbery, descriptions of the three, the license plate of the car Kim had mentioned, the email address. "Are you doing this right now?" Laura asked, almost in disbelief. "I can't switch off," he replied, without looking at her. "And I'm not going to let it consume you." Laura felt a mixture of relief and fear. Relief because he seemed to be in control. Fear because, if he was indeed in control, it meant the danger was real. When they finished, Daniel finally stopped. He looked at her with an almost painful tenderness. "Laura, you can choose to get out of this now. Go home. Cut off contact with me for a while." She laughed, but without humor. "After what happened, do you think I'm going to be able to sleep pretending that nothing exists?" Daniel approached and touched her face. "Then we're going to do it the right way," he said. "From today on, you won't walk alone. You'll vary your routes. You won't answer strange emails. You'll let me know if anything unusual happens." Laura felt her life suddenly shrinking, as if the city had become smaller. "Daniel, I just wanted to have dinner and see the lights." "Me too," he replied. "And I'm sorry." They fell silent. Outside, New York remained indifferent. Distant sirens, laughter, horns, as if nothing had changed. But for Laura, the city had just shown another side, the one Daniel had always seen. And deep down, she knew that night hadn't been a robbery. It had been a message. The following morning dawned gray, with a low sky that seemed to press down on the buildings. Laura went home early, before the traffic got heavy, and tried to act as if it were possible. She showered, put on work clothes, applied makeup to hide her pale face. But it all seemed like an act. As she exited the subway, the noise of the wheels on the tracks and the metallic announcement of the stations sounded like a constant warning. In the office, she tried to focus. She opened and closed spreadsheets. She answered ordinary emails, ordinary conversations. She laughed at moments when she should have laughed, but the image of the gun barrel kept appearing whenever someone dropped a pen. Her body was on high alert, as if the robbery had left an electric mark on her skin. Mid-morning, her cell phone vibrated with a message from Daniel. "Did you arrive safely? Send me a landmark." Laura responded with the building's address and a photo of her ID badge, as he had requested. It was strange to feel monitored, but it was also strange to realize that it brought a sense of security. "Okay, don't go out to lunch alone. And avoid 39th Street today," he wrote. "Why?" she asked. It took him a few minutes to reply. When he did, it was brief. Kim saw the same rental car nearby. Laura felt her stomach sink. She looked out the office window. Down below, the street seemed normal. People with coffee, delivery drivers, cars. Nothing screamed threat. And perhaps that was what made it all worse. Danger could be hidden in the ordinary. She spent the rest of the day trying not to look outside. That afternoon, Daniel met her at a prearranged spot near the entrance to a busy train station. He didn't want to pick her up at the building's door. "Predictability kills," he had said. Laura didn't know if he was exaggerating, but she obeyed. When she saw him, she felt an immediate relief. Daniel was wearing a simple jacket, a cap, and sunglasses, as if trying to be invisible. But invisibility wasn't his forte. He carried a presence, a silent weight. "Are you okay?" he asked, before anything else. Laura nodded, but her voice came out weak. "I'm trying." "Did you fall asleep?" Daniel gave a small smile. "A little." Kim sent information. They walked to a small cafe on a busy street. Not so busy that they wouldn't be an easy target, but not so busy that they couldn't talk. Daniel chose a table in the back, from where he could see the door and the street through the window. Laura noticed that he always did that. He took his old cell phone out of his pocket, opened a file, and showed her a picture of a car license plate. "That was the car Kim saw near my building yesterday. And this morning, it drove past yours." Laura felt a chill. "So it's real." Daniel inclined his head. "It's real. And worse." Kim managed to pull a name from the car rental. "It's not the real name, obviously, but the card used was traced back to a shell company." "About the case?" Laura asked, unintentionally. Daniel nodded. "One of the companies we investigated, but it should be shut down." Laura squeezed the coffee cup tightly with both hands, as if the warmth could stop the fear from growing. "Then why did they come back now?" Daniel took a deep breath. "Because someone is trying to tie up loose ends, or because someone wants me to go back inside. I don't know which one it is." He looked at her seriously. "Laura, I need to tell you what happened at the end of the Ridgeway case. The real story. No summaries." She swallowed hard, but nodded. It was better than she had imagined. Daniel began slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. "Ridgeway was the nickname for an operation. We were monitoring a group that moved weapons from states with more lenient laws to cities where demand was high. They used moving company trucks, fake stores, even charitable donations. The money came back through cryptocurrency and consulting firms." Laura listened, trying to follow along. Daniel spoke with an unsettling clarity, as if he were opening a drawer he had kept locked. "I had an informant, a guy named Marcus. He was a small-time criminal, but he wanted to get out. He had a family, and he gave me information in exchange for protection. And he died," Laura murmured, remembering what Daniel had said. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. "He died because someone leaked his identity, and I was never able to prove who it was." Laura felt a tightness in her throat. "Do you think it was someone from the FBI?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the street, at a woman walking by with a baby stroller. "I think it was someone with access," he finally said. "It could have been the FBI, it could have been another agency, it could have been someone with an inside contact. But I know the leak was surgical. And after Marcus died, the case became politically complicated. There were big people involved, companies, donors, names that nobody wanted to mention." Laura felt the world shrinking. "And you questioned that?" "I questioned it. I confronted it. I started pulling reports, asking for authorizations, putting pressure on them. And then I became the problem, the unstable agent, the overly emotional guy, the guy who needed leave." Laura remained silent, feeling angry at him. "And now someone wants to silence you," she said. Daniel nodded, but his face hardened. "Either they want to use me, because if I react the wrong way, I become living proof that I'm not okay. I become a risk. And then they can justify anything. Laura felt her chest tighten. But you reacted yesterday. I reacted because they had a gun pointed at you, he said, his voice tense. I wasn't going to let you become a statistic. Laura bit her lip. So what do we do? You can't just go back to the FBI and say, they're after me. Daniel gave a humorless smile. I can. But without proof, it becomes paranoia. And whoever sidelined me will love it. Laura took a breath, trying to calm herself. Then we need proof. Daniel looked at her, and there was a quick glint of light, as if she had said something he was expecting. Exactly, he said. And that's where you come in, unintentionally. You. Daniel opened another file on his phone and showed a screenshot, the strange email Laura had received, but now with technical details. I asked him to have this passed on to a cybersecurity analyst she trusts. This email wasn't just bait. The attachment had a tracker. If you opened it, it would have access to your microphone and location. Laura felt her blood run cold. My God, and you know what's worse? Daniel continued. The code has a signature, a way of writing. It's similar to something that appeared at the end of the Ridgeway case, when our computers were hacked and some evidence disappeared. Laura turned pale. So it's the same network, or someone with the same tools, Daniel corrected carefully. But yes, that's consistent. Laura remained silent for a few seconds, trying not to panic in the middle of the cafe. So they are watching us. They want me to make a mistake, Daniel said. Or they want to lure me in. Laura looked around. Everyone seemed normal. A woman typing on her laptop, a man reading a newspaper, as if the world had no conspiracies. I don't know if I can take this, she confessed, her voice low. Daniel exhaled slowly. I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. But I can protect you. And I can teach you how to protect yourself. Laura looked at him, tired. I don't want to become someone who lives in fear. Neither do I, Daniel replied. But fear and prudence are not the same thing. Fear paralyzes. Prudence keeps you alive. Laura felt his words sink in like a bitter truth. They finished their coffee and left. Daniel accompanied her to a spot where she could get a ride-sharing car. He didn't want to take the subway with her that night. Too vulnerable, he said. When Laura got home, she received another message. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from an unknown number. Do you think he is who he says he is? Laura stood motionless, staring at the screen. Her heart raced. She typed a reply and deleted it. She didn't respond. Minutes later, another message. You saw the part of him that he hides. He can't stop. Laura felt her hands sweating. She called Daniel immediately. He answered on the first ring. Laura, I'm receiving messages, she said quickly. From an unknown number. Don't answer. Take a screenshot and send it to me, Daniel said, his voice hardening. Laura took a screenshot and sent it. There was silence on the other end. Daniel breathed. This is new, he said. What it means? It means they've moved from monitoring to psychological pressure. They want to separate you from me. They want you to doubt them. They want you to see me as the problem. Laura felt her throat tighten. What if you go? She blurted out before thinking. It wasn't an accusation. It was fear. Daniel remained silent for a long second. I used to be the problem, he replied, with a painful honesty. I've made bad choices out of stubbornness. I've trusted the wrong people. But I'm not the enemy here. Laura closed her eyes. I'm scared, Daniel. I know, he said, more softly. And I'm sorry. You didn't ask for this, so tell me what to do. Daniel breathed. You're going to sleep with everything locked up tonight. No social media. Tomorrow, you're going to work from home. If you can and I'm going to come over. But not directly. I'm going to take a few turns. Check if anyone's following. Laura felt a small sense of relief. Okay. After she hung up, Laura went to her apartment window. She looked down at the street. A white van was parked on the other side, seemingly ordinary. Nothing indicated a threat. But now, everything seemed suspicious. She closed the curtain. That night, Laura dreamed of the street where the robbery took place, but the faces of the thieves weren't clear. Instead, there were shadows, and the shadows whispered Daniel's name as if it were a sentence. When she woke up early, she heard someone knocking on the building's door, footsteps in the hallway, and for a moment, she felt trapped inside a story she hadn't chosen. The difference was that now she wasn't alone. Daniel was on the move, and when Daniel moved, things changed. Daniel arrived late in the morning, as promised. Laura was in the apartment, with her laptop open, pretending to work. When she heard 3 short knocks on the door, her body reacted with a startle she hated. She only unlocked the door after looking through the peephole. Daniel went inside, closed the door, locked everything, and stood there for a few seconds listening, as if silence could tell a story. "Is someone following you?" Laura asked, without preamble. Daniel shook his head. "I didn't see anything clearly, but I took a very crooked path. If there was anyone there, I got tired." He took off his cap, ran his hand through his hair, and looked older than he had on the night he was in the park. Laura felt the urge to hug him and push him away at the same time. "You're exhausted," she said. "I'm on alert," he replied. Then he took a breath and softened, and yes, exhausted too. He walked around her room, observing the windows, the exits, the hallway visible through the peephole. Laura realized how Daniel transformed any place into a map of danger. It was both protection and prison. "I need you to trust me," he said, stopping in front of her. "But I also need you to question me when you think I'm going too far." Laura raised her eyebrows. "Are you asking me to do this? A former FBI agent asking me to hold you back?" Daniel gave a short smile. "I'm asking you to be my anchor, because I know how my mind works when it goes into threat mode." Laura felt the lump in her throat loosen slightly. It was frightening, but it was also the first time he had put it into words. Daniel's cell phone vibrated. He looked at the screen and his face turned serious. "Kim," he said. He answered and put it on speakerphone, but at a low volume. "Are you with her?" Kim asked bluntly. "Try. So listen carefully. One of the 3 guys from the robbery was released this morning," Kim said. Laura felt her body freeze. "What do you mean by released?" Daniel asked, his voice hardening. "Bail. And there's more. The lawyer who showed up for him isn't just any public defender. He's a guy who usually represents people with money and political connections." Daniel closed his eyes for a second, as if that confirmed an old fear. "Name?" he asked. Kim said the name. Laura didn't recognize it, but Daniel did. His expression changed as if he had seen a ghost. "That guy showed up at Ridgeway," Daniel murmured. "Exactly," Kim replied. "And another thing. Someone made an inquiry to Laura's address in the state system last night. It wasn't a formal inquiry. It was as if someone was using credentials they shouldn't have." Laura felt her stomach drop. "My address?" she repeated, as if the word were absurd. Kim continued. "I have no way of proving where it came from, but it's a sign. If you have a plan, do it quickly." Daniel hung up without saying goodbye. The room fell silent. Laura had her hands on her face, breathing rapidly. "They know where I live," she said, her voice breaking. Daniel approached and held her shoulders. "Look at me," he asked. Laura looked up, tears welling up in her eyes. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said, with a firmness that wasn't a romantic promise. It was a technical commitment, like an oath. Laura laughed desperately. "And how are you going to guarantee that, Daniel? You're not on duty. You don't have a team. You have nothing but yourself." Daniel was silent for a second. "I have someone," he said finally. "A contact I didn't want to activate." "Who?" Daniel hesitated. "A former informant. Someone who owes me a favor. He is on the other end of the line, but he knows things about who deals in car rentals, small arms, and expensive lawyers." Laura was afraid of what that meant. "That's dangerous." "Everything is already dangerous," Daniel replied. "The difference is whether we're blind or not." He picked up his old cell phone and dialed. Laura heard a few rings, then a hoarse male voice answered. "Who is it?" Daniel spoke a short code name. The voice on the other end changed, recognizing it. "You're alive," the man said, his tone a mixture of surprise and irritation. "I need information," Daniel replied. "You're on leave, right? People said you freaked out." Laura felt her chest tighten. Daniel maintained a calm tone. "I need to know who's using lawyer Harold V to get kids out of jail." The man gave a short laugh. "You're messing with old stuff, Miller. This isn't going to end well." "Who is it?" Daniel repeated. The man sighed. "There's a group operating between Jersey and Brooklyn, man. It's not a street gang. It's people who use kids as pawns. You took down a piece, but the guys at the top are stronger now. The name I hear is Carter, just Carter. Daniel frowned. Carter wasn't at Ridgeway. Maybe not by that name, the man replied. But Carter is involved in imports. Things arriving through the port, going through paper companies. And there are people inside helping. You know that. Laura listened and felt a chill run down her spine. Daniel asked a few more questions, but the man didn't give details. Only warnings, only implicit threats. If you want to survive, disappear, he concluded before hanging up. Daniel stood still, staring at his cell phone as if it were heavy. Laura felt the anger rising. Disappear? Is that it? She asked. Do we run away? Daniel took a deep breath, not necessarily fleeing, but changing the terrain. As Daniel opened the backpack he had brought, he took out a small kit, chargers, a notebook, and a folder with documents. I want you to pack a bag, just the essentials. We're going out of town for a few days. Laura blinked, incredulous. Do you want me to? Drop everything? I want you to stay alive, he replied. Laura felt the shock turn into indignation. Daniel, I have a job. I have a life. I can't just disappear. You can, he said, his tone becoming firmer. And I'll explain why. He sat down opposite her and spoke calmly. When someone starts pressuring you like that, it's not to kill you immediately. It's to break you, to leave you without routine, without support, without stability. And then you make a mistake. You open the door to the wrong person. You reply to a message. You go out alone. Laura bit her lip, trying not to cry. So what you're saying is that my life is over. I'm saying that your life has entered a risky phase, he corrected, and that we can get through this. But not here, exposed. Laura was silent for a while. Then she asked, almost in a whisper, where to? Daniel hesitated. A smaller town, near Albany. I have a friend there, an ex-cop, a guy who knows how to keep a low profile. Laura breathed, feeling her resistance dissolve in the face of reality. She didn't want to admit it, but fear had already taken hold. Okay, she said finally. I'll go. Daniel nodded, relieved. Thanks. Laura began packing a backpack with clothes, documents, and medicine. Daniel stayed in the living room, listening for any sound from the hallway. He seemed like an alert animal. When they finished, they carefully left her building. Daniel didn't want to take the elevator. They went down the stairs. Outside, the cold seemed more aggressive. Daniel chose a route with less visibility, avoiding major avenues. They got into a ride-sharing car, but Daniel asked the driver to change the destination twice, as if he wanted to confuse any possible pursuit. Laura watched, trying not to panic. On his way to pick up a rental car, Daniel received another call from Kim. You need to go now, she said. I just saw some strange activity. Someone inside asked for your updated address, Daniel, and there's a target location alert with your name on it. Daniel closed his eyes. Is there a way to block it? He asked. Not without drawing attention, Kim replied. But I can be late, do it, Daniel said. And Kim, if it goes wrong, don't say that, she interrupted. Just go. Daniel hung up. The ride-sharing car stopped near a smaller rental agency, not a large chain. Daniel preferred that. Less internal tracking. Laura found it strange that he knew those details. They got in the car, and left the city via the bridge, heading north. As the buildings thinned out and the trees grew taller, Laura felt a slight sensation of breathing. But it wasn't freedom. It was just less noise. 2 hours later, already on a road surrounded by dirty snow on the sides, Daniel suddenly slowed down. There's been a car behind us for a while, he said. Laura glanced in the rearview mirror. A dark SUV with nothing to draw attention. But now, anything would. Do you think it is? I don't know. But I'm not going to wait to find out the hard way. Daniel took one exit, then returned to the road via another. The SUV also entered. Laura felt panic rising. They are following. Daniel took a deep breath, but his voice calmed down again, as if that calmness were a tool. Okay, he said. Then we'll see how far they go. He pulled into a service area, stopped near a large truck, and turned off his headlights. Laura stared at him. What are you doing? I'll watch, Daniel said. Stay low. Don't look directly. Laura obeyed, her body trembling. The SUV pulled into the service area, drove slowly, and stopped a few meters ahead. Two men got out. They didn't look like truck drivers. Dark clothes, tense posture. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes fixed on the object. They came, he murmured. Laura felt terror take hold of her. "Daniel, are we going to die?" He looked at her, and in that look there was a silent promise, but there was also something darker, the certainty that the license had expired, even if the paper said otherwise. "No," he replied, "but today, I'm going to have to be who I didn't want to be again." The two men in the SUV walked toward the service area's convenience store. One of them looked around as if checking cameras and movement. Daniel remained motionless in the driver's seat, his breathing controlled, as if each breath were a count. Laura was crouched on the bench, feeling the cold fabric beneath her fingers. Her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure it could be heard outside. "They're going to come into the store," Daniel murmured. "That's good, good," Laura whispered, almost hysterically. "It means they don't want to act out here yet. They're measuring things out, or waiting for us to make a move." Laura felt her throat close up. "So, what do we do?" Daniel looked in the side mirror, at the position of the SUV, at the parked trucks. "We'll exit through the side now, and go behind that red truck. It's running and the driver is inside. Human movement is for protection." Laura's eyes widened. "You're talking like this is an operation." Daniel didn't answer. He simply opened the door carefully and motioned for her to leave quickly and quietly. The cold air hit Laura's face like a slap. She ran crouched down, her legs weak, following Daniel behind the cars until they reached the red truck. Daniel gestured for her to hide behind the wheels. He leaned close to her ear. "Stay here. If I say run, you run inside the store and scream. Got it?" Laura grabbed his arm, desperate. "Don't leave me." Daniel touched her hand firmly. "I'll be back," he said. "Breathe." He walked away silently, circling the truck. Laura stood there, trembling, trying to make out something through the metal and the exhaust fumes. Then he heard a male voice, "Too close." "No." Laura froze. It wasn't Daniel. She saw one of the men from the SUV emerging from the corner, a few meters away. He saw her. His gaze narrowed. "Look at this," he said, smiling humorlessly. "I found it." Laura tried to scream, but no sound came out. The man took a step. His hand went into his coat pocket, and then Daniel appeared. He appeared behind the man, quick, grabbing his arm and pulling him back in a twisting motion that made the man lose his balance. There was no punch, just a brutal lever that put the man on the ground. The man tried to react, but Daniel was already on top of him, immobilizing him with his knee and pressing his wrist against the asphalt. "Where's the other one?" Daniel growled, for the first time with genuine anger. The man laughed, even though he was in pain. "You never learn, Miller." Laura felt her blood run cold. They knew his name. Daniel squeezed harder. "Where is he?" Daniel repeated. Before the man could answer, a dry thud echoed. "A gunshot!" Laura screamed. Daniel turned his face reflexively. The bullet hit the metal of the truck with a loud crack. The other man was near the store, with a gun in his hand, partially hidden behind a column. Daniel dropped the man to the ground, grabbed Laura by the arm, and threw her behind the wheels of the truck. "Get down," he shouted. Laura cowered, her hands on her head, feeling utter terror. Daniel leaned forward, assessing the situation. The sniper had the advantage of position and cover. Daniel was unarmed, and that was the worst part. He was fighting with his bare hands against armed men. He looked at the truck driver, who had now exited the cab, startled, observing the commotion. "Get in the truck. Start it and drive away." Daniel yelled at him. The man hesitated, confused, but another shot made him understand. He ran back to the cabin. Daniel pulled the man who was on the ground and used him as partial cover, grabbing him by the collar and dragging him to a place where the shooter's view was blocked. "Are you with them?" Daniel asked the man, his eyes gleaming with contained fury. The man was spitting blood. "You shouldn't have left the game," he said. Daniel clenched his fist, but controlled himself. He didn't want to hit out of anger. He wanted information. "What do you want?" Daniel asked. The man smiled, even though he was in pain. "You know, what you took, what you kept." Daniel stood motionless for a second. Laura, listening, tried to understand. "I have nothing," Daniel said. The man laughed. "Liar. You always kept a copy. Daniel gripped the man's collar, his voice now low and dangerous. Who sent this? The man didn't answer. He just looked to the side, as if he had received a sign. Daniel followed the vehicle's gaze and saw the red truck beginning to move, slowly pulling away. This was both good and bad. Good because it was getting civilians out of there. Bad because it was reducing their cover. The shooter shifted his position, trying to get a better look. Daniel pulled Laura by the hand. "Let's go," he said. Inside the store. Now, Laura didn't want to move, but she obeyed. They ran crouching, weaving through the cars, feeling the wind and smelling gasoline. Laura heard another gunshot. Glass shattered somewhere. A scream inside the store. They entered through the automatic door. Everything seemed slow and fast at the same time. People throwing themselves on the floor. A clerk behind the counter. A woman crying. Daniel shouted, "Call the police now. There's a shooter." The attendant was trembling, but he picked up the phone. The gunman entered soon after, pushing the door open forcefully. He was a man in his early 30s, with cold eyes. The gun was firmly in his hand. He wasn't nervous. That was worse. He looked at Daniel and smiled. "Miller," he said, as if they were acquaintances. "I thought you'd learn to be quiet." Daniel positioned himself between the shooter and Laura, his body acting as a shield. "You're putting civilians at risk," Daniel said, trying to buy time. The shooter laughed. "Civilians are always at risk. You know that." He pointed the gun at Laura. "Either you give me what I want, or she dies." Laura felt the world stop. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at Daniel, pleading without words. Daniel stood motionless for a second. Then he took a deep breath. "What do you want?" Daniel asked, his voice controlled. The shooter tilted his head. "One unit of evidence. One drive. One file. You made a copy, Miller. You always did." Daniel clenched his jaw. "I don't have it with me," he said. The shooter took a step and placed his finger on the trigger. "So tell me where it is." Daniel looked at Laura, and she saw in his eyes a painful decision. It wasn't just about that moment. It was about years, about guilt, about the dead informant, about the leave of absence. "He's in a safe place," Daniel said. "Where?" The shooter insisted. Daniel breathed. "I'll tell you if you let her go." The shooter laughed loudly. "Do you still think bargaining works? You've been out of it for too long." He grabbed Laura's arm with his free hand, pulling her closer and using her as a shield. Laura screamed, her body trembling. Daniel stepped forward, his hands raised, just like before during the robbery. But now there was a real gun. The shooter whispered something in Laura's ear, as if he wanted her to feel afraid. Laura was crying. Daniel saw that, and something changed. Not an outburst, an absolute coldness. He looked at the floor, at the drink shelf, at the reflection in the glass door. He calculated an angle, and then, in an almost invisible movement, Daniel kicked a crate of bottles onto the ground. The sound of shattering glass exploded like thunder. The shooter instinctively looked down for a split second. That was enough. Daniel lunged forward, grabbing the gun's wrist and pushing it aside. The shot rang out and pierced a shelf. People screamed. Daniel twisted the shooter's arm forcefully, trying to disarm him. The shooter was strong, trained enough to resist. They slammed against the counter, knocking over packages, coins, a display of chewing gum. Laura fell to the floor, free, rolling behind the counter with the clerk. Daniel and the gunman fought with a violence that seemed raw, real, without glamour. The gunman tried to hit Daniel with the butt of his gun, but Daniel dodged and struck him in the face with his elbow. Blood gushed from the man's nose. He grunted, but didn't drop the weapon. For a moment, it seemed the shooter would succeed. The gun was pointed at Daniel. Laura saw Daniel's look, a brief acceptance, and felt the panic turn to pure despair. But then a siren sounded outside. The police were arriving. The gunman hesitated for half a second. Daniel took advantage. He delivered a short, brutal headbutt, and the man staggered. Daniel finally snatched the gun, threw it away, and pushed the gunman against the glass door. The glass cracked. The gunman, even unarmed, pulled a knife from his pocket. A quick flash. Daniel tried to back away, but there was little space. The knife cut his arm, a shallow cut, but enough to draw blood. Laura screamed. Daniel grabbed the man's wrist and twisted it, causing the knife to fall. The police entered at that moment, guns drawn, shouting orders, "Drop it." On the ground, the shooter slowly raised his hands, smiling, as if the game was still under control. Daniel also raised his hands, panting, blood on his arm. A police officer ran over and held him, confused, seeing that he was not the attacker. "He tried to kill me," Daniel said. "He's armed." He was. The police officer picked up the gun from the ground. They handcuffed the shooter. The handcuffed man turned his face to Daniel and smiled, even though he was bleeding. "You've just gotten back into the game," he whispered, "and now you won't be able to get out." Laura was behind the counter, trembling, and saw Daniel close his eyes for a second, as if that phrase was a sentence he already knew. The ambulance arrived. The police asked questions. Laura could barely answer. Daniel, with his arm bandaged, gave his statement with a clarity that made the police officers uncomfortable. He knew the terminology. He knew the procedure. He knew what to say without incriminating himself. An older police officer, with tired eyes, pulled Daniel aside. "Are you a federal agent?" he asked. Daniel replied. The police officer narrowed his eyes. "So why the hell is someone trying to kill you in a service area?" Daniel didn't answer. He just looked at Laura, and the police officer understood that this was more than just a road rage incident. When they finally let Laura go, it was too late. Daniel held her hand in the parking lot of the local police station, where they had taken those involved for questioning. "Are you hurt?" he asked in a low voice. Laura shook her head, but tears were streaming down her face. "I thought you were going to die," she said. Daniel squeezed her hand tightly. "I thought so too," he admitted. "And this cannot happen again." Laura breathed, trying to regain some control. "He mentioned a drive," she said. "Do you actually have something?" Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he nodded, with a visible weight on his face. "I have it," he confessed. "A copy of the Ridgeway files. I kept it because I knew someone would try to erase everything. I didn't want to be paranoid, but I couldn't trust it." Laura felt anger and relief at the same time. "And you never told me." "I wanted to protect you from my world," Daniel replied. "But my world found you." Laura took a deep breath. "So now we have a weapon, figuratively speaking." Daniel nodded. "Now we have proof, and that means they're going to come back stronger." Laura looked at him. "So what are we going to do?" Daniel stared at the gray sky, as if he could see something beyond it. "We're going to deliver this the right way," he said, "to someone who isn't compromised, and we'll survive until then." Laura squeezed her eyes shut, feeling that her life had turned into something else entirely. "What if there is no one clean?" she asked. Daniel looked at her. "So we create a way out, even if it's the last one." The road to Albany seemed longer than on the map. It wasn't just the distance, it was the feeling that every car behind them could be the next enemy. Daniel drove with absolute concentration, his bandaged arm resting carefully on the steering wheel. Laura, in the passenger seat, held her cell phone as if it were a dangerous object. From the service area, she didn't trust anything that vibrated or blinked. They stopped at a simple roadside motel, one of those with dim neon lights and the smell of cheap cleaning products. Daniel didn't want to spend the night at his friend's house without first checking if they were being followed. "First, we disappear. Then, we reappear," he said. The room was small, with a queen-size bed, a wooden table, and an old TV. Daniel tested the window, checked the lock, and looked at the parking lot through the curtain. Laura watched everything, exhausted. She wanted to sleep for a week. "I feel ridiculous," she confessed, sitting on the bed. "Like I'm in a bad movie." Daniel took off his coat and hung it on a chair, but maintained an alert posture. "Movies make it look glamorous," he replied. "The reality is just exhausting." Laura laughed bitterly. "Exhausting and terrifying." Daniel approached and sat down beside her. The yellow light from the lamp made the dark circles under his eyes more visible. "I need to tell you the plan," he said. "And you need to understand that, from here on out, every choice has consequences." Laura nodded, feeling an overly adult weight fall upon her. Daniel took the flash drive out of its case and placed it on the table, as if it were living proof. It was small, ordinary, but it seemed to carry the energy of a bomb. "This contains copies of reports, recordings, names, transfers. I kept them because," At the end of Ridgeway, evidence disappeared from the official system. It wasn't a mistake. It was a purge, he explained. Laura looked at the flash drive as if it were an animal. And who do you want to give this to? Daniel breathed. For an internal affairs division that I trust. Or for a federal prosecutor who isn't in anyone's pocket. Kim gave me a name. A prosecutor in Albany who has a history of standing up to big shots. And you really trust him? Laura asked. Daniel gave a short smile. I don't trust anyone 100%, but I trust his standards. And I trust that if I deliver this the right way, with documentation, with witnesses, it becomes harder to erase. Laura swallowed hard. And are we going to be witnesses? Daniel nodded. Try. Laura felt a different kind of fear. It wasn't the fear of a gun. It was the fear of losing her life as she knew it. Daniel, this will change everything, she said. I know, he replied. And I hate it. But the alternative is worse. Laura remained silent. The TV made a low hum, like an insect. Outside, a car passed and light streamed through the curtain for a second. Laura shrank back. Daniel realized. I'm going to teach you something, he said. A simple trick for when fear overwhelms you. Laura looked at him, breathing. She tried, ironically. Daniel almost smiled. No. Focus on facts. List 5 things you see, 4 that you feel, 3 that you hear, 2 that you smell, 1 that you taste. It's basic, but it brings you to the present. Laura breathed and tried, feeling her body slow down a little. She saw the bedspread, the lamp, the flash drive, the curtain, the backpack. She felt the fabric of her clothes, the cold on her skin, the bed, the weight of her cell phone. She heard the TV, the hum of the heater, footsteps in the hallway. She smelled the detergent and the stale coffee. She tasted the dryness in her mouth. It worked, sort of. Thank you, she said. Daniel nodded. I can't fix everything, he replied. But I can be here. The next morning, they left early, before sunrise. Daniel drove to a modest house in a residential neighborhood near Albany. It was the home of Frank, his friend, the ex-police officer, a large man with a gray beard, whose gaze seemed to measure people. Frank opened the door and stared at Daniel as if he were seeing a ghost. You look like you're in trouble, he said. Daniel gave a tired smile. I brought trouble, he replied. Frank looked at Laura, assessing her. And her Laura. My person, Daniel said, and the word came out strangely, but sincerely. Frank made room. Come in, and tell me quickly, because I don't like surprises. Inside, the house smelled of wood and coffee. There were old photos on the wall, a younger Daniel in his uniform, Frank with his classmates. Laura realized that Daniel had once lived a life where friendships were built on risk. Daniel outlined everything in general terms. Frank listened in silence, only asking pointed questions. So you have proof, Frank concluded, looking at the flash drive. Daniel nodded. And you want to hand it over to a prosecutor, Frank said. Yes. Today, Daniel replied. Frank scratched his beard. Are you sure you're not being led? He asked. That this isn't a trap to pull you out of the hole and make you look like a crazy person with a flash drive. Daniel took a deep breath. I thought about it, he said. That's why I need you. To be a witness. To record it. To guarantee chain of custody. Frank looked at Laura. And are you ready for this? He asked. Laura swallowed, but nodded. I didn't choose this, she said. But I'm here, Frank sighed. Okay. So let's do it right. They spent the morning preparing. Frank brought an old tape recorder and a cell phone with a camera. Daniel wrote a summary of the contents of the flash drive, with the date and signature. Laura signed as a witness, her hands trembling. Frank also signed. If anyone tries to say that this appeared out of nowhere, we have a record of it, Frank said. When they arrived at the prosecutor's building, a concrete and glass structure, Laura felt her heart race. It was a formal place, full of corridors. Everything seemed safe, but she no longer believed in security just because there was a reception area. Daniel spoke with an assistant, giving the prosecutor's name. They waited in a small room. Laura observed Daniel. He seemed calm on the outside, but his foot tapped lightly on the floor. After 20 minutes, a man entered. He was younger than Laura expected, perhaps in his 40s, with short hair and a simple suit. He extended his hand. Daniel Miller? he asked. Daniel squeezed. Yes. Thank you for having us. The prosecutor looked at Laura and Frank. Who are they? Witnesses and protection, Daniel replied. The prosecutor gestured for them to enter his office. He closed the door. You know this is a sensitive matter, he said. And you know I may be required to open a formal investigation, which could expose you. Daniel nodded. I know. The prosecutor looked at the flash drive. What's here? Daniel handed over the sealed envelope. Evidence of corruption and leaks linked to the Ridgeway case, he said, and proof that someone tried to cover up the case and is trying to intimidate me. The prosecutor became serious. He didn't seem surprised. And that scared Laura. Can you prove that this is authentic? He asked. Daniel pointed to the summary, to the signatures, to Frank's recording. I have proof of chain of custody from now on, Daniel said. The prosecutor looked at Laura. Do you understand what this means? He asked. Laura breathed. I understand that I could become a target, she replied, her voice firm despite her fear. But I also understand that if I stay quiet, it will continue. The prosecutor nodded respectfully. Okay, he said. I'll forward this. But I need to be honest. If this is as big as it seems, you won't be safe. Daniel looked at him. So you have a protection plan? The prosecutor hesitated for a second. I have access to a program, but it's not automatic. Daniel leaned forward. They've already shot at a service area, Daniel said. This isn't theory. The prosecutor became more serious. Do you have a record of this incident? Frank pulled out a folder containing the local police report, copies, and names of the officers. The prosecutor flipped through the pages. His face hardened. Okay, he said. We'll act fast. That's when the prosecutor's phone rang. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and turned pale. Repeat it, he said. Are you sure? Daniel looked at Laura, alarmed. The prosecutor hung up and stared at Daniel. I was just informed that a federal agent came here earlier today asking about you, he said. Daniel stood motionless. Name? The prosecutor called out a name. Daniel recognized it, and his face went blank for a second, as if he'd been punched. That guy. He was at Ridgeway, Daniel murmured. Laura felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The prosecutor continued. He said you're unstable, and that any evidence you bring could be fabricated. And he asked me not to record anything until I confirmed with Washington. Frank swore under his breath. Daniel took a breath, controlling his anger. So he's already trying to discredit me, Daniel said. The prosecutor nodded. Double quotes, yes. And that means the leak is real, and that you're on their radar. Laura felt her body tremble. What do we do now? She asked. The prosecutor stood up. From this moment on, the material is officially in my hands, he said. I will formalize it, redundantly. But you need to leave here and go to a safe place. Now, Daniel looked at Laura, and she understood. Handing in the evidence didn't end the danger. It only changed the phase. They left the building through a side exit, guided by a security guard. Daniel kept Laura close, but without suffocating her. Frank drove his own car, another vehicle that wouldn't attract attention. On the way, Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror. A dark car appeared behind him, distant but persistent. Frank noticed that too. He's with us, Frank said, his voice harsh. Daniel took a breath and spoke calmly, but without illusion. So now they know that we delivered. Laura felt a wave of fear and, at the same time, a strange clarity. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about not letting fear define the ending. Frank accelerated and turned onto smaller streets. The car behind him followed. Daniel picked up his old cell phone and called Kim. Kim, it's now, he said. Her voice came quickly. I already know. The system exploded. You gave it away, didn't you? Try, then you're going to need real protection. I'll contact someone I trust. And, Daniel, don't do anything stupid. Daniel looked at Laura before answering. I'm not alone, he said. I can't act like I'm alone anymore. Kim sighed. So do what you should have done at Ridgeway. Trust the right people and document everything. Daniel hung up. Frank's car turned onto a narrow street. A truck was partially blocking it. Frank braked. The car behind accelerated, trying to cut him off. Daniel opened the door before coming to a complete stop. What are you going to do? Laura shouted. Daniel looked at her. I'll buy you some time, he said. You stay with Frank. Don't get out of the car, no. Laura grabbed his arm. Daniel cupped her face in his hands, his gaze firm and human. Laura, I need you to live. Understand? If I fall, you continue. You talk to the prosecutor. You talk to Kim. You don't let this die. Laura was crying. I don't want a world where you disappear, she said. Daniel breathed, and for a second his control mask cracked. Me neither, he replied. But I'd rather you live in a world without me than die in a world with me. He let go and left. Daniel ran to the back of Frank's car and closed the door. The pursuing car pulled over to the side, and two men got out. One of them was the same man from the service area. The other was younger, older, with the posture of someone who had done this before. Miller, the older man, shouted. You screwed up. Daniel raised his hands, but his body was ready. You guys already screwed up when you thought you could erase people, Daniel replied. The man laughed. Do you think handing over a flash drive will change anything? You're just a broke guy. Daniel took a step, his gaze cold. I'm a broken guy who still remembers names. The older man hesitated for a moment, as if it were dangerous. And then sirens blared in the distance. They weren't close, but they were coming. Frank had triggered an emergency call, and Kim probably had too. The two men looked at each other. The older one cursed. This isn't over, he said, stepping back. They got into the car and sped off, disappearing down the street. Daniel stood still, breathing heavily, his body trembling not from fear, but from adrenaline and something else, the awareness that he had narrowly escaped death. He went back to the car. Laura was crying, trembling. Frank's face was hard, but he was relieved. Daniel sat down and held Laura's hand. Is it over? She asked, her voice breaking. Daniel looked at her honestly. Not today, he replied. But we turned the tables. Now there are big players watching. Now there's a record. Now it's not just our word. Laura breathed, feeling a kind of small, painful hope. And what about our lives? She asked. What happens to them? Daniel shook her hand. It will be different, he said. But it doesn't have to be smaller, just more conscious. Frank drove toward his house, where they would stay for the time being, awaiting instructions from the prosecutor and Kim. Laura looked out the window. Trees passed by, houses, people taking children to school, a normal life that seemed distant. She turned to Daniel. You're not a movie hero, she said, still crying. Daniel gave a weak smile. Thank God, he replied. Movie heroes don't feel guilt. Laura rested her head on his shoulder. She smelled the scent of dry, cold blood. She felt his heart beating. Real. Present. The city had tried to swallow them both, but now they were grappling with something that, however frightening, was also liberating. The truth, recorded, delivered, and impossible to unsee. And for the first time since the night of the robbery, Laura realized that their story wasn't about being attacked by criminals. It was about how to ordinary people, one who wanted normalcy, and another who could never switch off, learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is taking the next step even when you're trembling. And they still had many steps ahead of them.